Every day at Sierra, you'll find top brand apparel, footwear, and gear for 20 to 60% less than department and specialty store prices. And during clearance time at Sierra, those incredible prices are 40 divided by 2.5, carry the 1, even lower. And when you shop clearance at Sierra, you can save a whole lot more on everything you need to get active and outside. That's a lot of saving. Epic brands, vast selection, teeny tiny prices. That's Sierra. Visit your local Sierra store today or shop online at sierra.com.
For those who know that questioning everything includes questioning this show's existence. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Public health messaging. It loves telling us what to do, sometimes in a rather bossy tone. But what if the style of messaging, when it's bossy, backfires? Well, a recent study shows forceful health advice can trigger people to resist it, not comply with it. Why does being told you must do something make us dig our heels in? We are here with media psychology professor at Northwestern University, Nathan Walter, who has studied this topic. Nathan, it's an interesting one, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Great to be with you.
So I want to know what happens in people's heads the moment a health message comes at them. Maybe it's an ad on TV, maybe it's radio, maybe it's in print, and it switches from you could do this to you must do this.
I love your question because it is what's happening in our head. It seems like we have this universal impulse to value freedom. And once we feel like our freedom is threatened, we tend to react negatively. And advice from experts is just one example. But, think about these annoying ads that you can skip. Or think about having a friend telling you, you have to watch the show, you have to watch the show. At some point, you have to restore that freedom. So you're just basically going to do something like not watch the ad, like ignore your friend's recommendation.
You can communicate the same information in many ways. One is like a very forceful, you must do it, you must agree to it, yes or no. And the other is like a very helpful frame, like, join me on my side and we'll do this together. It's the same end result, but the style of messaging does affect how something's perceived, right?
Absolutely. We sometimes think that when we're very forceful, it communicates, our certainty, our passion, and then people will comply. But in reality, it just tends to backfire. So, like you suggested, you can tell people you have several different options. And this is what I would do. This is what I would suggest. We see it a lot with things like, oh, you can always opt out. You control your data. So any type of linguistic cues that remind people that they still have control.
I don't want to talk about a polarized topic like vaccines, so let's pretend there's a good medication for you called a schmaxine. I'm kidding, of course, but we're told we must take it. Is resistance kind of like somebody's inner teenager yelling, "You're not the boss of me. You can't tell me what to do," rather than listening to reason?
Absolutely. And it is the case that we often call this psychological reactance. So it is the case that it's universal, but you mentioned teens, so I'll be remiss not to say that teens and terrible twos seem to have the strongest manifestations of this. But once you are very forceful with someone, we get into this automatic state where we get angry and we react. And, just as an example, imagine that you're driving to work and someone cuts into your lane. Right? You immediately get angry. They just took your freedom, and you will try to do something to restore that freedom, as opposed to someone signals that they want to get into your lane and you feel so generous, you allow them to, you feel actually wonderful about yourself. So I think this is a good analogy to recommendations from experts.
And it's the same end result. That person takes the spot in front of you while you're driving, and it's a very different reaction. Let's get to public health messaging. Are there kinds of words or kinds of messages that raise red flags for people that can act defiant like that? Was there any particular language that you were struck by that caused people to say no, even when it would be a good public health decision?
Yeah, I think, so if we're talking about schmuck scenes and social media, often when social media platforms will censor or deplatform people who make false claims, it seems like a good idea, but it's almost like the forbidden fruit. Now you took away my ability to get this information. Now I want this information even more. So these types of actions seem to be less effective. Also, any type of very forceful language that tells you this is the only reasonable thing to do. That's the only way out of this pandemic is doing this. Probably not the smartest choice because um, it's not that these types of commands actually equal compliance.
Knowing what you know now about how people perceive these kinds of strong words, you must do this, it's the only way to get out of this public health emergency, what would you recommend to policymakers or the people designing the messaging, supposing they had a great medicine that could prevent infection or certainly lower it?
I think we just need to perhaps slightly adjust our entire messaging strategy. So, what tends to work very well are messages that are not overtly persuasive. Again, so if this threat is associated with they are trying to force me to do something, we can be less obvious about our intent. That's why often testimonials do such a great job. I'm not telling you that you have to vaccinate your kid. I'm telling you what happened to a friend who decided not to vaccinate their kid. That's also why often messages in TV shows like Grey's Anatomy or now The Pit are so effective. Again, this is not a overtly persuasive message. It's almost like like a Trojan horse where you
Yeah.
embed a message, but people don't feel like you're preaching to them, like you're forcing them to do something.
That's interesting. Here's what happened to me. Here's what happened to a friend, rather than you need to do this, you must do this. Let's step away from like public health emergency stuff, but and apply this to maybe like smoking cigarettes, drinking, lack of exercise. These are things that people need to change in their life if they're doing the first two and not doing the last one. How would you communicate to people that they should be more healthy, more active?
There's a variety of ways to do this. So, one thing that we never want to do is we don't want to scare people too much. One of the kind of most frustrating findings we have, especially with smokers, when you scare them, and a lot of the public service announcements, they will tell you, if you smoke, you die. Actually, the first thing that people who smoke want to do when they get very anxious is smoke even more. So, in a way, you want to reverse that script. You want to actually make them feel better about themselves because then they're not as defensive. So you can tell people, like, I understand why it's difficult. I understand how you feel. Or if you want to tailor the message to a particular group in the population, for instance, think about there's a huge disparity in tobacco use with LGBT individuals. So, if you want to tailor a message to that community, you may want to emphasize the wonderful things that the community has achieved and then talk about smoking. So, anything that will not make us defensive, but actually will make us feel better about ourselves.
Here's an interesting one. If someone listening responds to authority with that, you can't tell me what to do attitude, I might be guilty of that myself. What can I do to make sure I'm making good health decisions and I'm just not reacting to authority?
In a variety of ways, when we say authority, it assumes that people who are experts have credibility. And it's a problematic assumption right now,
Yeah.
right? Because there's just way more, credibility is a complex thing. So I guess that the recommendation overall is to emphasize people's choices, people's options. And in the same way that if you want your kids to have a dinner it's better to say, do you want, pasta or rice? It's probably better to give people options and let them choose their path. The end result is the same.
Well, Nathan, this conversation has been interesting. Thank you for coming on the show and having it and sharing your research. I appreciate you being here.
My pleasure, David, anytime.
Nathan Walter is a media psychology professor at Northwestern University.
Welcome to Survivor 50.
February 25th on Global.
We chose you to represent 25 years of the greatest adventure on television.
It's the biggest season ever.
The twist is going to open up Pandora's box.
Now I see Zach Brown on Survivor.
Welcome to Survivor, Mr. Beast.
Feels a little like a high school reunion meets a massacre.
Survivor 50th season. Wednesday, February 25th on Global. Stream on Stack TV.